Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. Today, we are going way back to ancient Egypt, to be precise. We're cracking open the book of Exodus, chapter 9, and diving into some really intense stuff. Think plagues, tough leadership choices, and maybe even some surprising takeaways for you.
It's amazing how these ancient stories can still resonate thousands of years later, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah, the themes of leadership, accountability, and resilience are as relevant today as they were back then.
Totally. Okay, so let's set the scene. We're in the middle of this power struggle between Moses trying to lead the Israelites out of slavery and Pharaoh, who is, well, let's just say he's not exactly a flexible guy.
Right.
So to convince Pharaoh to let his people go, God sends these plagues upon Egypt.
And in Exodus chapter 9, we encounter three particularly devastating plagues.
Okay.
First, all the livestock die.
Wow.
Horses, camels, everything. Then comes a plague of really painful boils,
Oh, that's awful.
afflicting both people and animals. And if that wasn't enough, a massive hailstorm wipes out crops, even killing people and animals.
It sounds utterly terrifying. Imagine the fear and desperation people must have felt.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. Throughout all this chaos, the Israelites and their livestock are unharmed.
Mhm.
It's a stark contrast that highlights God's protection of his people and further emphasizes Pharaoh's defiance.
Okay, so Pharaoh sees all this devastation, right?
Right.
I mean, he even sends people to confirm that the Israelites' animals are miraculously untouched. Yet he still refuses to let them go. Why?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's almost like a textbook case of what we call cognitive dissonance.
Okay.
He's confronted with undeniable proof that contradicts his worldview, but instead of adjusting his thinking, he digs in even deeper.
It's almost like he's trapped in his own stubbornness.
Uh-huh.
But, it makes you wonder, how often do we do the same thing in our own lives? We cling to our beliefs even when presented with evidence to the contrary.
More often than we'd like to admit, I'd wager. It's a very human tendency to resist change, especially when it challenges our deeply held beliefs or threatens our sense of control.
So we've got this powerful, stubborn leader, ignoring obvious warnings and causing widespread suffering. Sounds a bit too familiar, don't you think?
It's the age-old struggle between power and compassion. And sadly, it's still playing out in various ways today.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Think about the consequences of ignoring expert warnings on climate change, for instance, or the human cost of prioritizing profit over worker safety.
It's a sobering thought. But amidst all this darkness, there's a glimmer of hope, right? Not every Egyptian blindly followed Pharaoh.
That's right. Some Egyptians actually heeded the warnings about the hail, taking shelter and protecting their families and livestock. They saw the danger, assessed the situation, and chose a different path than Pharaoh.
So even in the face of stubborn, even destructive leadership, there's still room for individual choice, for taking responsibility for our own well-being and the well-being of those around us.
Exactly. We can choose to be like those Egyptians who took shelter, to be proactive and make informed decisions rather than simply following the crowd, especially when the crowd is headed in a dangerous direction.
This brings up a point that I find fascinating. It's not just about blind obedience or defiance. It's about informed decision-making and critical thinking, even when under pressure.
Precisely. And speaking of pressure, remember those Israelites facing immense hardship as slaves in Egypt. They clung to their faith, supported one another, and ultimately persevered. That speaks volumes about the power of community, especially in the face of adversity.
This resonates so deeply. When we face challenges, our communities, our shared values, and our collective action can be a powerful source of resilience.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're not alone in our struggles and that we can draw strength from one another, just like the Israelites did. But there's another layer to this story, a concept often called faithful stewardship.
Okay, now that's intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, remember how the Israelites' livestock were spared from the plagues?
Yeah.
This wasn't just luck. It was a reflection of their faith, their commitment to living in accordance with their values.
Yeah.
And it was a reward for their faithful stewardship, their responsible care for what they had been given.
So you're saying that living with integrity, making choices that align with our values, can actually offer a form of protection, like a way to navigate difficult times with more resilience.
I think that's one of the powerful takeaways from this story. Think about it. When we live in alignment with what we believe is right, when we prioritize integrity and compassion, it creates a sense of inner strength, a foundation that can help us weather the storms, so to speak.
It's like building an internal shelter, a source of resilience that comes from living in accordance with our deepest values. I love that image.
It's something we can all cultivate, regardless of our beliefs or background. It's about asking ourselves, what are my core values? And am I living in a way that reflects those values, even when it's hard?
These are powerful questions, and they bring us back to that initial question we posed. If we were in Pharaoh's shoes, would we have the courage to change course? Would we be able to admit we were wrong, to choose compassion over ego, even when it means sacrificing power or privilege?
It's the ultimate test of character, isn't it? And it's a challenge that resonates just as strongly today as it did thousands of years ago. Perhaps that's why we keep coming back to these ancient stories.
They offer a timeless roadmap for navigating the complexities of human nature and that ever-present struggle between power and compassion. And sometimes, maybe they even offer a glimmer of hope. After all, even in the midst of those terrifying plagues, there were individuals who chose to act differently to protect themselves and those around them.
That's what I find so fascinating about this story. It's not just a tale of divine intervention and punishment, it's also a story about human choices, about the
Yes.
potential for both incredible cruelty and remarkable compassion.
And the impact those choices have not just on individuals, but on entire communities. It makes you think about those modern-day plagues we face: climate change, social injustice, economic inequality.
Mhm.
Are we as individuals and as a society heeding the warnings, or are we hardening our hearts?
It's a question worth pondering, because just like those Egyptians facing the plagues, we have choices to make. We can choose to ignore the warnings, to cling to our own comfort and security, or we can choose to act with compassion and courage to protect the vulnerable and to work towards a better future.
And maybe, just maybe by reflecting on these ancient stories, by examining the choices made by both Pharaoh and those who defied him, we can find the wisdom and the inspiration to make the right choices in our own lives.
It's about recognizing that even in the darkest of times, even when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges, we have the power to choose a different path, a path of compassion, resilience, and hope. And that, I believe, is the enduring message of Exodus.
It's incredible how these ancient stories, even ones filled with plagues and divine wrath, can offer such profound insights into the human condition.
It's like they tap into something universal, something that transcends time and culture.
Mm.
We might not have pharaohs and chariots anymore, but the challenges of leadership, the struggle for justice, the importance of community, those themes are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago.
It makes you realize that human nature hasn't really changed all that much. We still face those same fundamental choices between clinging to power and acting with compassion, between ignoring warnings and heeding the call to action.
And that's why engaging with these stories is so important. They hold up a mirror to our own lives, prompting us to ask some tough questions about our own beliefs and actions.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Exodus, what are the key takeaways you hope our listeners will ponder? What wisdom can we glean from this ancient tale of plagues and resilience?
I think it boils down to a few crucial points. First, the importance of compassionate leadership. Whether we're in a position of authority or simply navigating our own lives, are we leading with empathy and a willingness to listen? Or are we hardening our hearts to the needs of others, prioritizing our own comfort and security above the well-being of the community?
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. Regardless of our roles or positions in life, we can all strive to be more compassionate leaders, even in our own small ways.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the second takeaway, the power of individual choice. We're not just passive bystanders in the face of challenges. We can choose to heed warnings, to take action to protect ourselves and those we care about, just like those Egyptians who sought shelter from the hail.
It's a powerful reminder that we always have a choice. Even when it feels like the world is crumbling around us, we can choose to be proactive, to make informed decisions, and to create positive change, even in the face of adversity.
And finally, there's the concept of faithful stewardship. That idea that living in alignment with our values, acting with integrity and responsibility, can offer a profound sense of inner strength and resilience.
It's like cultivating that internal shelter we talked about earlier, a source of strength and resilience that comes from living in accordance with our deepest beliefs.
Exactly. So to our listeners out there, we leave you with this final thought. What warnings are you ignoring in your own life? What choices can you make today to lead with more compassion, to build stronger communities, and to live in greater alignment with your values?
It's a question worth pondering because the answers just might surprise you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Exodus.
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.